Week's live stream, and today we're going to be going through how you can work full time and still get insane results. So I'm going to start you off with a bit of a quote, which is cheesy and I fucking hate it, but the more I have lived and the more environments I've been in, the more applicable it is. And that is, you are the product of the 5 people you spend the most time around, or the product of the 5 people you most look up to. And I say this because your environment is super important, as it's super infectious on where your head is at the majority of your day. So I've worked in bartending, I've done laboring jobs, I've worked in the offices, I've done a bunch of different environments, and the number one challenge of all of that was trying to swim against the tide. When you're doing something that's completely different to the status quo, it's going to be difficult. So one of the most important aspects that you can address is making sure that you're in an environment that's conducive to what you want to achieve. Now, when I was in bartending world, eating meal prep was just unheard of. Everybody would just have like schnitzels and palmies and whatnot on break, and then you'd be there with your little plastic Tupperware container. And it makes it difficult because trying something new is always going to be hard to begin with, because you've already got your own doubts that are there. And then you've got a bunch of other people that are going to be there almost ostracizing you, thinking like you're being a fucking weirdo eating your chicken and rice or eating your omelets at work, whatever it may be. So, and then you have two options. You either join them and do what they do, which is the easy route, or you carve out your own path and you be that shit guy that doesn't want to get around it. So yeah, if you find somebody or if you're in an environment where you find it's incredibly difficult, more so than it should be, to forge your own path and forge your own way forward, then it sounds like you might need to switch up your environment. But that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is how you can work full time. And I'm going to use the example of when I used to work in an office-based lifestyle. So I'd be working 8 to 5 every day, and how I would still get in 2 training sessions, how I would still get in over 10,000 steps a day, and still keep all my macros, everything on point. So this was a lot of trial and error, to be perfectly honest with you. And you've got to address, what are the non-negotiables in your day-to-day. For example, I knew that from 8 until 5, I was going to be at work. So that sort of time there was already out of the picture. That meant that I had a bit of time beforehand, before work, I had a bit of time after work, and then I had a lunch break of roughly 30 minutes. So as gay as it sounds, block planning is actually going to be your best friend, especially to begin with. Now, the sort of higher barriers for entry are always going to be there I think they're there as a challenge to yourself to show that you're actually interested in what you actually want to achieve. So you do the block planning because if you can find a regime that works best for you and you can put that effort into it, then you deserve to have the treats. If you can't even put the inputs in at the start to get past that initial hurdle, which most people fall over at, then you don't deserve the treats at the end. And the main thing that when I first started doing this sort of full-time work and wanting to train for the bodybuilding show was I like to train in the evening, but I found that by the time I got to the evening, I was already cooked, I was hungry, didn't really have heaps of motivation. So it was just a case of, okay, I've got this problem, how do I solve it? And then it was, I've got this problem, how do I solve it? And that streamlining of the process is kind of what you've got to work through. And you either can figure that out by yourself, or you can just get somebody that's been there and done that to help you. Both of them work. So how my days would work would be this, is I would wake up at 5 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. I would train in the morning until about 8. And then from 8 to 8:30, I'd do my meditation, I would eat my breakfast. And then from 8:30 from 8 until 5, I would be working. And that was great because it meant I got my session in the morning. So after work, when I was tired, I didn't have to worry about it. I'd already front loaded my day. I'd got a full day's work in. I could chill out in the evenings. I could go to the beach. I could go hang out with the missus, whatever. So I had that flexibility there. But then as the demands for the training ramped up, so did the necessity to sort of change up my situation. For example, I needed to do 60 minutes of cardio each day to burn a bit more fat. But then you're like, fuck, I can't do 60 minutes of cardio just in one hit. It's going to be more difficult. So what I'll do is I did 15 minutes in the morning. I would do 45 minutes after work. And then if I needed to get more steps in, what I would do is I would have my lunch and then I would go for a 20-minute walk around the block. Now, movement after consumption of any sort of food is super, super good for your digestion anyway. So I would recommend that. But it was about, if all of the chips were down, how could you get it done? Not could you get it done, it's you have to get it done. How's it going to be done? And then that's how we'd figure it out. So it would be, about streamlining the process and going from there. And then I also found that, when I would finish work, and I needed to do my cardio in the evening, if I went home and had my food, and I went home, had some food, that it would be pretty hard to get my motivation back up to then put on my training kit and then go out and crank out a bunch of steps or whatever I needed to do. So I found that if I just went straight from gym to work, work to gym, gym to home, that was the best way. Because if I stayed 1 minute just at the home, sat down on a couch like this, chilling out, I'd be cooked and I would have no interest in getting up and flogging myself out. So then what did I do? I cut out that little stoppage in between work and home, work and gym, where I went home and ate, and I would just eat something before I left work, go and do my session, then head home, chill out. Perfect. Now, the other sort of complication that you can sort of come up with when you're working full time is the nutrition. So most of us, we have a pretty manageable schedule. You know when you're going to go into the office, you know when you're going to finish, you know when your lunch is roughly going to be. So you have a lot of already predetermined, a lot of predetermined sort of time blocks. You can eat before, you can eat during the day, and you can eat after. So what would work really well is I would keep my breakfast and my lunch super consistent. I would train in the morning, because if I train in the morning, then I know it's a priority for me. It's going to get done, non-negotiable, and it does get easier. I don't believe in morning people and evening people. I think that's complete bullshit. It's largely to do with what your body is conditioned to. And if you're not conditioned to waking up in the morning, of course it's going to be more difficult. So that's a whole other can of worms which we won't go into. But if you know that you're waking up and you can train, and then you can have a breakfast and then you can go to work, this is the block planning I'm talking about. So you'd put in gym 6 till 7:30. That gives you a bit of time to shower, whatever you need to do. Then you go 7:30 to 8, transport over to work 8 to 5 or whatever hours you work. On your lunch break, you've already got your meal prep that you've done through the week, and then you would go from there. And then in the evening, maybe you like to cook dinners fresh, and you can take it from there, so you don't have to. And during the week, one of the struggles I faced was I was always too fatigued to want to cook in the evenings. So that sort of necessitated the need to do meal prep on the weekends, because if I didn't have the energy, then I could just do it in a time when I did have the energy, which was Sunday night. And then you just put together this nice little routine, and it's nothing crazy, but you've taken a step back. You've not just gone into the week and you're just putting out fires. You just sit there on one Saturday afternoon or whenever it is, and you go, okay, this is when I can't work. This is when I'm going to be at work. This is when I could potentially train. This is when I could potentially train. I like to have Wednesdays off because I usually get a bit fatigued maybe I've been training hard at the start of the week. I like to have that as one of my rest days. And then I'll go Monday, Tuesday, rest day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then do another session on the Saturday. And that would be the process of how you can juggle in all of your sort of full-time work and still get results. So largely it's about sort of about framing it properly. And I would call this putting it in an extreme frame. So instead of just, what could we do? It's, if you had to fucking do this or you'd get shot in the head, how would you do it? And then just let that sit there. And it's like, okay, if you had to get in 50,000 steps a day or you'd be, executed, how would you do it? You would find a way to get 50,000 steps in every single day if that was the sort of wager there. So sometimes it's a pretty crazy way to think, but I mean, it does serve its purpose, right? It's like you can get in and train, you can get in and get your meal preps in if you frame it properly. So make sure you do that. And then my sort of key takeaways are, if you do the inputs properly, then the outputs will become passive. So I call that passive gains. It's things that you can do where it becomes second nature. If you meal prep, then you're going to be hitting your macro targets. You don't need to think about what you're going to eat, so you can tick that box. If you train in the mornings, you know that you're going to be getting the volume in, you know that your intensity is going to be there, your frequency is going to be there, so you can forget about it. And then you don't need to stress about whether you're going to get results, because they will just start happening. And then I just came off a call with one of my guys. Once you start getting results, it's motivating to just keep on that path. But if you're going hard and then you're pulling out and then you're all over the shop with your routine, then you're not going to get any momentum. You're not going to see tangible, long-lasting results, which is what it's really all about when you boil it down. And that's where you want to be. But ultimately, this is the breakdown. I would block plan, see when you're going to work. If it was in a bar, for example, and I knew I was working nights, I would go, cool, I'm working 3 until 12. I'm going to train before then. I'm going to train from 12 until 1:30. I'm going to have some lunch, chill out, and then I'm going to go to work 3 till 12. And then I'm not going to obviously do anything while I'm there because I'll be up on my feet. And then I'm going to have a snack before I go to bed because I don't want to be completely cooked when I go to sleep. Something like that. So you can figure out, the big pieces and shuffle it all around from there. So look, if you don't know where to start, then DM me a question that you've got. There's no obligation to, do anything further, but there's always answers to your questions. And the best thing you can do is just ask questions. That's how we all learn. You learn from people that you haven't spoken to before, right? The best knowledge that is out there that you don't know is from somebody you probably don't know. So ask me any questions that you've got about building up routines, about what it takes to build muscle, what it takes to dial in your nutrition, sleep, all of those habits. Be more than happy to share some insights. And most importantly, just be your own hero. This is your life. It's much shorter than you think it is. And it's much too short to be fucking around not seeing the best version of yourself. So be your own hero, and I'll see you guys in next week's live stream.